So, we'll be hearing from Srimad Bhagavad-Gita as it is. So why this title, As It Is? Does that infer that there are editions of the Gita as it is not? Yes, it does, unfortunately. As it is. Prabhupada said, I am simply presenting what Krishna has presented, that's all. I'm not adding or subtracting. Of course, in a sense, he's also giving his own sweet realizations, but they are not out of some imagination. Those who are familiar with Srila Prabhupada's writings, they know in his purports, often he's always quoting other authorities to back up what he says. Other shastric references from scripture, and also references to previous acharyas, previous spiritual masters, the Mahajans, etc., etc. This is the way of speaking in spiritual circles. You make some statement or description, but then you back it up with some authoritative source. This is proper. So therefore, Prabhupada gives the title Bhagavad Gita as it is, not as someone might like it to be or thinks but not sure how it is. No, as it is. Full parampara explanation. There are so many links in the chain, there are so many personalities, you could say. This is one of the mysteries of parampara, but still the connection is direct. And without going through the parampara, there is no connection. There is simply an illusion of a connection only. This is Krishna's own prescription. We didn't make it up. And he says it in so many ways in so many places. One very often quoted verse in the 4th chapter, Tavadi patipatina patipasnena sevaya upadeksanti te jnanam jnanastatva darshinaha. Just try to learn the truth. How? By approaching a spiritual master. Then what? Inquire from him submissively. Anything else? And render service unto him. And what happens? The self-realized soul can impart knowledge into you because he has seen the truth. So this is Krishna's own prescription. I'm just now remembering or recalling how I was giving a lecture once in one temple, and there was one nice Indian gentleman who was attending the temple regularly and earnestly trying to take up Krishna consciousness. But he had some problem, at least mentally, who to accept as guru, who to accept as spiritual master. So one day he just asked, he said, can I just accept Krishna as my spiritual master? So I answered him at that time in this way. Initially I said yes, but what does that mean, accepting Krishna as spiritual master? Well, it means so many things, but one of the main things is that you have to accept the words of instruction of Sri Krishna. Otherwise, there's no meaning to saying you accept Krishna as guru. And he said, yes, I have to agree with that. There would be no meaning unless I would accept his instructions. So one of those instructions is the verse I just quoted, Tavadi pati patina patipasnena sevaya upadeksanti te jnanam jnanastatva darshinaha. So that you have to accept. He said, yes, I understand. But of course, if one is simply sincere, one does not have to worry about finding a bona fide spiritual master. Krishna will give you guru if you have these two things, a little bit of initial sincerity and seriousness of purpose. If you have a little bit of that, Krishna would take care of you in his own sweet time. Of course, we know in the Leela, manifest pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, he did not take formal initiation until so many years after first having met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But of course he did accept him immediately in his heart. That's another thing. And if one is reading Srila Prabhupada's books, he's also connected. That doesn't mean you can jump over or skip over the process of initiation, but still some connection is there. Anyway, so we should go into tonight's verse, which is the last verse of the 3rd chapter, verse 43. So I'll just read through the Sanskrit myself. Evam budhe param budva. I can't see very well here. Samstab yatmanam atmana Jahi Satchum Mahabaho Kamarupam Durasadam. So we can try to do the synonyms together, please. Evam, thus. Buddhe, to intelligence. Param, superior. Buddhva, knowing. Samstabhya, by studying. Atmanam, I can't see. The mind. Atmana, by deliberate intelligence. Jahi, conquer. Satrum, the enemy. Mahabaho, O mighty armed one. Kamarupam, in the form of lust. Torasadam, formidable. Now the translation. This is a very scholarly and progressive manner in which Srila Prabhupada presents his books. The original Sanskrit is there. Each word is given the pronunciation and also definition. And then finally the translation in whatever language it's being translated into. And then Srila Prabhupada's own purport on the text. So the translation reads this. Thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should study the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. And now Srila Prabhupada's purport on the text. This third chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul, but by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind, by steady intelligence directed toward one's pure identity. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage, attempts to control the senses. One second. Attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Thus end the Bhakti-Vedanta purports to the third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad-Gita in the matter of karma yoga, or the discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness. Om Gyanachandasya Gananjana Sadakaya Chaksu Unmanitam Yena Tasmai Sukirve Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master came and forced to open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. So I'll read the translation once again. Thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should study the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So many things are mentioned here. Is speaking about intelligence. This is very attractive to intelligent people. There's a nice verse, there's so many, of course. In the last chapter, verse 70 says that Ajasate chaya mamidam dharmyam samanam avyo geninan nigna tenaham iti memati, where Krishna says that, and I declare that he who studies this sacred conversation of ours, meaning the Gita, worships me by his intelligence. So this is very attractive. I don't have to leave my intelligence home on the shelf somewhere to take to spiritual pursuit. No, you must bring your intelligence with you. You must employ it. Otherwise, Krishna, the ultimate end in the Gita, he's demanding surrender. But if your intelligence is not satisfied, you'll not be able to do it. Otherwise, why does he speak the whole Bhagavad-Gita? Why so much philosophy? The intelligence has to be convinced. Practically, the entire Gita is on the platform of purification of our intelligence. In the beginning, we learn from different angles of vision how to discern matter from spirit, or our own identity apart from matter. And Krishna shows us, he doesn't make some empty blanket statement, but he shows us in many verses from many different angles of vision, especially in the second chapter, how this is so, how it's a reality. And so that the intelligence being convinced, we can focus ourselves to making further progress in Krishna consciousness. We know how Srila Prabhupada from time to time would quote Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur saying that religion without philosophy is just sentiment, or sometimes it gets taken to extremes and turns into fanaticism. Whereas on the flip side, philosophy without religion or any works performed in devotion is just a dry, tasteless process of mental speculation. There's no real pleasure there. So Srila Prabhupada would also refer to Krishna consciousness as the perfect theistic science. Yes, it is based on works in devotion, but those works in devotion are very solidly grounded in very profound philosophical understanding, such as from Srimad Bhagavad-Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and similar such literatures, and the teachings of all the great acharyas like this. So it's a good thing to have a soft heart, but it's not so good to have a soft brain. Therefore, we have to apply ourselves here. Actually, strictly speaking, Prabhupada mentioned that philosophy means Krishna's philosophy. Everything else is more or less a different brand of speculation, practically speaking. So if we can receive that philosophy or understanding coming down in a descending fashion, this is parampara, unchanged, then if one is honest, one would have to admit, at least in that way, there's a chance of my attaining perfect knowledge and understanding, realization, etc. But if I'm trying to ascend on my own strength with my own limitations and defects, it's how far can I get? Not very far. I have imperfect senses, I'm subject to illusion, I commit mistakes, I don't like to admit it, but I also have a cheating propensity. So if that's all I have to work with, I'm doomed from the outset. Forget the particular details of your process. If that's all you have to work with, there's no future there. But again, if you can at least theoretically understand, if I can receive it coming down from a perfect source, at least in that way there's a chance. So here's a body of knowledge, thousands of years old, predating all the other traditions of the world, practically speaking, in other scriptures. And you can study the lives, examples, and also instructions of the propounders of these teachings, and in that way become convinced that there is something very solid here. This is the most illuminating and comprehensive source, all-inclusive source also. So again, the intelligence has to be convinced. Otherwise, one who is steeped in pure prema or love for Krishna, he's already on the platform. He doesn't need to be convinced, he's there. But we've been temporarily covered over by the influence of the modes of material nature and also contaminated hearts. We have voluntarily adopted, unfortunately, an envious attitude towards Krishna. Instead of being satisfied being a cooperator with Krishna in his enjoyment and enjoying in that way, we start to think, why can't I be Krishna? Or why can't I be the center like this? And that's the root cause of our trouble, so to speak. But all is not lost. All is not lost. We are very fortunate that Krishna, he does not make such a thing as eternal condemnation. No. You want to be the supreme enjoyer yourself? Okay, here you try. Here's the material world. But he puts it together in such a way, on purpose, that there's frustration and perplexity at every step. So why does he do that? No, he doesn't like to see us suffer. He's got better things to do. But this suffering, perplexity and frustration at every step gradually gives rise to inquiry into the nature of the absolute truth, atato brahma jignasa. We start inquiring, is there anything more to life than this? I mean, really? And who am I really? And what is my real purpose? And is there an ultimate solution, not just some temporary solution, to all the problems of life, especially the big ones, birth, death, disease, old age, and all the other ones to come with that? It gives rise to these types of inquiries. So therefore, it has good purpose. So Krishna is described as this material creation is with a twofold purpose. It gives us a field of activities. So, okay, you try to be the supreme enjoyer, especially the supreme proprietor, the supreme friend, and gradually, you become disgusted and you get it out of your system. And then when you're ready, you can turn towards me again, and I will instruct you, such as in Srimad Bhagavad-Gita. And we can become reinstated. All is not lost. Another quote from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying that what the rebellious, envious, conditioned souls really deserve for turning away from Krishna, wanting to be Krishna, is that we should become null and void. That's what we deserve. But Krishna doesn't consider like that. He gives us a chance. This material world is also a chance. This creation is a chance to become purified and come back to Godhead. So especially in the human form of life is the most advantageous position, because this particular body allows the consciousness to expand far enough to atato brahma jignasa, inquire into the nature of the absolute truth. And in the human form of life, we can make an ultimate solution to all the problems of life, the big ones especially, repeated birth, death, disease, and old age, and everything else that comes with that. And besides making a solution to these problems, we can revive our original consciousness, our original constitutional position. This is called Swarup Siddhi, perfection of one's constitutional position. And that is as Krishna Nityadas, eternal servant of Krishna, in a particular personal relationship, which is of our heart's desire. And Krishna will reciprocate in that way with us. So why do we form any relationships, even bodily relationships in this world? We're seeking that perfect reciprocation, but we never really quite get there. Whether it's between lovers, between parents and children, between very close-knit friends, etc. Everyone has their limitations, and ultimately everyone dies, and everything's terminated. How satisfying is that? But this is a natural propensity, because we have that eternal relationship, or ras, with Krishna, eternally. Just now, it's not been lost. It's been temporarily forgotten or covered over, but it can be uncovered or awakened once again. And that is what this process of what is called Vaidhi Bhakti, or sometimes called Sadhana Bhakti, is meant to do. It's devotional service in practice, but practice doesn't mean artificial. It's the natural energy of every living being. And with a little so-called practice, it is reawakened once again. Otherwise, you could practice forever and nothing would happen. But we can see in our own lives and in the lives of other sadhakas, other practitioners around us, something is happening. causes knowledge is developing, and also a sense of detachment from the material world is also occurring. So there are evidences or symptoms, and in degrees as we progress. So it doesn't simply stay on the platform of theoretical acceptance only, but there's also room for experience and realization along the way. You don't have to wait until after you leave this body to find out whether or not you wasted your time. There's also, in degrees, there's also realization as one progresses. And that makes one conviction very, very fixed. I'm on solid ground here. It's not just some empty wishful thinking on my part. It's just another book and a set of teachings that some other conditioned soul has written. No, not at all. So many things are being spoken here, and the intelligence is being, again, being emphasized. So Krishna mentions the intelligence in different places in the Gita. Let's see. Ultimately, for one pursuing the spiritual path, the instructions of the bona fide spiritual master becomes one's intelligence. So we learn how to discern matter from spirit, and in this way separate our identity, how we actually identify ourselves, from the material world. We're not a product of this material world, although I know they teach that in the schools, in the materialistic schools. But it's not a fact. We are going through or traveling, or usually the word used is transmigrating, through so many different bodies, or you could say changes of body. But we're not the changes themselves, we're going through the changes. And we have practical experience of this. Maybe you have some photos when you were a baby, a little boy or girl, an adolescent, middle-aged, elderly, so on. So we've gone through so many changes of bodies, have we not? We have this experience. We all had a particular form inside the womb of our mother, and then we took birth. We had a baby's body, which is, these bodies are no longer existing, but we're still here. And then we had a little boy or girl's body, that's gone, but we're still here. Then an adolescent body, which is also gone, a middle-aged body, etc. But we're still here. So this is also birth and death. We're leaving off, I should say, and taking on new bodies. But we are different from those bodies, or from those vehicles, you could say. Just like if you have a car, you maintain the car, but if you're sane, you don't start thinking you are the car. If you start thinking like that, your friends may say, hey, so-and-so, better you seek out some professional help. You got a problem. So it's funny, but in the same way, we're convinced this, in Sanskrit it's called yantra, machine or body, we're convinced it is us. Some people may say, oh, no, I understand this is just a shell. But you look at the way that they lead their lives, and the way they lead their lives is as if this is me. But it's not. This is the first lesson in transcendental science, at least theoretically to understand. And I think I pointed out earlier that especially in the second chapter, Krishna points this out from many different angles of vision, so our intelligence can grasp the concept as a concrete reality, not just another fanciful idea like that. And then lift this off, at least to some extent, lift this off the bodily platform and keep our focus on transcendence, about making spiritual advancement. Strictly speaking, advancement means spiritual advancement, because we ourselves are spiritual beings. We're not a product of the material nature. And no matter how much material so-called advancement is made, if they don't know the first thing, if they don't know who they are, then what is it worth? Even they say you can't take it with you. That means at the time of death. But we can take whatever accumulation of advancement in Krishna consciousness with us, even if we don't make 100%. The devotee is always the gainer. If somehow or another, due to worldly mindedness or whatever, he falls away from the path, generally speaking, in his next life, he's given a chance to resume progress from the point where he left off. He doesn't have to start from zero again. So this necessitates, at the minimum, at least getting the human form of life again. and then let's say you made, let's just call it 20% progress. So then you'll be given the chance to resume progress from 21%. You don't have to start all over again. Anything materially done, even if you make a so-called 100% progress, you start, after death, that's it. You have to start from scratch, zero, all over again. So the devotee is always the gainer. Of course, the materialists in that and many other ways are always thinking backwards. They're thinking that they're the gainer, and the devotee is the loser. Hey, Hare Krishna, you loser, why don't you get a real life? But we should ourselves be convinced, at least, that we do have the real life, and they don't. We can ask them, who are you, sir? And what will he give you? He'll give you some bodily designation which has nothing to do with himself. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm young, I'm old, I'm black and white, I'm fat, I'm thin, I'm a computer technician, I'm a carpenter. Of course this is who I am. Here's my ID. But all these things are having to do with his body only. But as I was trying to illustrate in the beginning, we're not this body. So this is actually ignorance. Just like if you have a billion ones, let's say, or a billion zeros even, it adds up to zero. But if you put a 1 in front of all those zeros, it's a very significant sum. So that one meaningful thing is Krishna consciousness. That gives meaning to everything, because that's who we really are. This is the most important science. Many times people will say, you're just a bunch of leeches on society. You don't contribute anything worthwhile. We contribute the most important thing, without which everything else is meaningless. If you don't know who you are and what the purpose of life is and how to become eternally happy, not just so-called temporarily happy, then what do you know? That is ignorance. You may have a dozen PhDs beside your name, but if you're still thinking you're a product of the material energy and maybe dressing it up in more complicated language, you're still in ignorance, practically speaking. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur would sometimes say like that, the more learned a fellow becomes, materially speaking, the more ignorant he is of his real spiritual identity. Of course, these material things can also be used in Krishna consciousness. That's another thing. But ultimately, without Krishna consciousness, they don't have much meaning, ultimately. So we can also lose our intelligence in many different ways. Just like in the 7th chapter of the Gita, there's mention of those who worship the various devas, the demigods. Especially in verse 20, it is stated that where Krishna says that those whose intelligence is stolen away by what? By their material desires. What do? Surrender them to demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. So according to their own natures means what particular mode of nature that is prominent, having prominent effect upon them, whether it be goodness, passion, or ignorance. Those who are very prominently in the mode of ignorance may take to the worship of Bhadra Kali and slaughter animals in front of her and offer liquor and things in the mode of ignorance. Those who are more impassioned may take to other worship, and those in goodness, etc. But Krishna consciousness is transcendental worship. It has nothing to do with the modes of material nature. And ultimately worship is meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but sometimes it is done in an irregular and ignorant fashion as worship of the demigods, who are simply the Lord's parts and parcels. They are His servants, carrying out His instructions. This morning it was mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam class that there are at least 33 million administrative demigods, and then there are more also, but 33 million are in charge of administration affairs throughout the universe, conducting all the workings of practically everything. So Krishna is the enjoyer. He doesn't have to go to work. He doesn't have to come to the material world and have a direct hand in all the goings on here just to keep it together. Rather, he assigns these duties to others, such as the demigods, and empowers them to take care of these particular things. So then what does he do? Well, he's got his own pleasure abode, and he goes on with his pleasure pastimes uninterrupted. He doesn't have to tell the gopis or the cowherd boys, hey, look, I got to go to work now in the material world. I'll be back tomorrow. I got to take care of things. He doesn't have to do that. You don't never read anything like that. Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. Even in the material world, some big multi-billionaire, he just engages in sense gratification and employs others to work. He just flies around in his private jet or on his private yacht and so-called enjoys. So even if someone, a big man of this world can do like that, then why not the supreme person? He does not have to go to work, so to speak. He's simply the enjoyer. Actually, Prabhupada made one reference. He actually had one German godbrother. And just before the German godbrother had joined his spiritual master's mission to Gaudiya Math, he was traveling around India, and he was visiting various different kinds of temples, the demigods and other temples. And he remarked that all the different devas, they had a different function or a different work to perform. Then when he came to the Vaishnava temple and saw Radha Krishna, they were simply dancing, playing the flute and enjoying. This is God. He doesn't have to work, he just enjoys. He very intelligently concluded, this is God. This is the Supreme Personality. That's intelligence. So we are not this body, gross or subtle. The subtle body consists of mind, intelligence, and false ego. False ego doesn't mean to say ego itself is false. But if you identify wrongly, ego simply means the sense of I am or I exist. If you misidentify, that's false ego. But there is also real ego. Krishna Nityadas, your eternal servant of Krishna, like that. So, in the material world, we have coverings of materially tainted mind, intelligence, and ego. But the soul proper, or the real self, the real me and you, we also have those functions of mind, intelligence, and ego, and also body or form. But all these things spiritually are non-different from us. You could say spiritually, in the spiritual world, I am this body. There's no difference. Just like there's no difference between Krishna and Krishna's form. But in the material world, there's a big difference. This thing, this machinery here, the body, is not me. It's a covering. And we change it so many times within the same lifetime even, from babyhood to boyhood to youth to old age, like this. Satchidananda Vigraha, the Lord also has his personal form. And the Lord also displays his intelligence in many different ways. There's so many things are just now coming to mind. Just like we hear the pastimes of the Lord's incarnation as Lord Nrsingadev. And generally we think that's the Lord displaying his supreme anger. But it is. But it's also displaying his supreme intelligence. Those who are a little bit familiar with the story, they know how Hiranyakashipu performed great austerities. Lord Brahma became pleased with him, appeared before him, asked him what kind of boon you want from me, why are you performing these austerities? And what did he ask for? He asked for eternal life. And Brahma had to say, well, sorry about that. Even I don't live eternally. I may live for some millions, trillions of years, but I also have to die. But generally speaking, Lord Brahma is the most intelligent being in the universe. But Hiranyakashipu, he thought he was more intelligent. So he said, that's okay. You will grant me a series of other benedictions. Is that all right? And Brahma said, yes, that's okay. Oh, good. I won't die in the daytime or the nighttime. I won't be killed by any man or animal. I won't die inside or outside. And he ran down a whole long list like this until he thought he had all the bases covered. And then he started to laugh. Now I am eternal. I have fooled Lord Brahma into giving me these benedictions. But the Lord appeared in such a way that he could not conceive. We know the story how the Lord appeared from a pillar in the palace. and he burst the pillar open and appeared out of the pillar in a form never seen before. And the form was that of half man and half lion. So you cannot say it's man, and you cannot say it's beast. And it's described that the Lord killed him with his own personal nails. So that's not exactly a weapon, a fashioned weapon. And it wasn't inside or outside, but it was in the threshold, right in the doorway. And it wasn't daytime or nighttime, it was twilight. So in other words, I can go down a whole long list, but you get the idea that the Lord kept intact all the benedictions Brahma gave him without breaking any of those benedictions, but killed him anyway. So this is the supreme intelligence of Krishna. He's always at least a little bit, actually a whole lot, more intelligent than anyone. So he also wants us to become intelligent. Sometimes it is said that the sincere disciple should feel like a fool before the spiritual master. But then Prabhupada added that that doesn't mean you act like a fool. Because how does that reflect upon the spiritual master? This is your disciple? What an idiot. So we should become at least a little conversant with Srila Prabhupada's writings. It's not expected everyone's going to become super philosopher, but we should try as far as our capacity will allow, like that. So it's also mentioned in the purport, one other thing is that without considering voidness the ultimate end of everything. There are different classes of impersonalists, Buddhists, and Mayavad, and others. They have some conception like this, that ultimately everything is all one, homogeneous, or it's all zero void. Practically, what's the difference? It's the same thing in a different package. Sometimes Prabhupada would call Mayavad philosophy covered Buddhism because of this reason. But that's all right. You want to say this world is illusion, but why do you stop there? Why not ask a further question? Okay, if this is illusion, ask yourself, where does the idea for the illusion come from, if not there in the absolute truth? There's nowhere else to come from. Therefore, variety, personality, etc. must also exist there. This is the Vaishnava position. In the material world, it is simply reflected, but in a perverted manner. Our original prema or love for Krishna is perverted and is manifest here as lust or desire for personal bodily sense gratification. But that's a perverted reflection of something else, our prema, our love for Krishna. Just like in the 15th chapter, this is described a little bit, and the comparison is made like trees on the bank of a reservoir of water. They have their reflection on the water, but everything is inverted. Anyway, the verse says that, the first verse of the 15th chapter, that Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Udva Muram Adha Sakam Tam Pavar Avyam Tam Yasha Parnani Yastam Vedas Vedavit. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree which has its roots upwards and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So again, the example is there with the tree on the reservoir of water. You look at the reflection, everything is inverted, and if the water is moving, it's further distorted, like this. But in our case, the medium of reflection is not water. The medium is desire. Our desire has been perverted or like this. But by indulging in the process of purification, the sadhana bhakti, it can be brought back to its original pure state once again. We try to artificially put ourselves in the center. Numero uno, I'm number one, but actually Krishna's number one. But that's why everything is in conflict. To give a crude example, just like if you have a handful of small pebbles and you throw them in the water, they all make concentric circles, but all the circles overlap each other. They're not in harmony. But if you could somehow or another throw them all in the exact same spot, then all the concentric circles will be in harmony. There'd be no clashing or overlapping. So that one central spot is Krishna. Our aim should be Krishna. Because that's who we are, with his parts and parcels. We all know the simple examples that just like by watering the root of a tree, all the limbs, the flowers, branches, twigs, leaves, etc., are automatically nourished and taken care of. Whereas if you go around with a little spray bottle of water and try to spray them all individually, there's going to be very little or perhaps no benefit at all. That's not the process. You water the root, that's the process. Or you give the food or the prasad to the stomach, and then all energy and everything else required is distributed throughout the entirety of the body. There's a nice instructive little story that one day all the senses, they got together and said, who is this bum, the stomach? He doesn't do anything. We do all the work. We're going to stop giving him the food, giving him the prasad. We're going to take it directly. So what happens? If the hand tries to take the prasad directly, it just creates a mess. There's no nice taste, there's no nourishment, there's no strength gained, nothing. So they went on strike for a little while, and they started to notice, oh, we're not gaining any strength, any enthusiasm, anything at all. Actually, it's the stomach who's the main, who sees to the main organization of the entire body. So we made a mistake. We'll go back to giving the food to the stomach. That's the process. So because we are Krishna's parts and parcels, therefore, for that reason, it's in our best self-interest to serve him. And by serving him, we automatically become fulfilled and satisfied because that's who we are. But if we try to do something else, like put ourselves in the center, it doesn't work. It backfires. And we get just the opposite. We've been trying to do like this since time immemorial. Who knows how many lifetimes. Now the time has come to try something else. Try serving Krishna again. That is our real constitutional position. And because it's constitutional, therefore there's fulfillment. There's fulfillment and satisfaction in that way. And only in that way, because every other position is contrary to our real position. At least philosophically, we should be able to understand this and then execute the process, at least make an experiment with the process. Again, here's a tradition thousands of years old, predating other traditions of the world, and so many great teachers are here. You should give it some of your time. We give at least 20 years or more to regular, ordinary, mundane education, so why not vow to give at least the same amount of time to this? Why not? You got nothing to lose. You got everything to gain. At least you can say, I tried. Otherwise, we are simply a royal edition of the animal kingdom. We may be using computers, but if all we're using computers for is to assist us in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, then we're just simply a more sophisticated or royal style of the animal kingdom only. Again, human life begins with atato brahma jignasa, inquire into the nature of the absolute truth. That's real intelligence. Even if not understanding in the beginning, at least inquiring in the right direction. The other species are also inquiring in their limited and crude fashions, but it's totally limited to eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. They cannot even imagine anything beyond that. But this body allows us to consider the absolute truth and to inquire into it. Therefore, it's very valuable and precious, and it's not going to last that long. I mean, in this age, most people don't live beyond 100 years. It's very rare. And so we don't have much time left. 100 years, let's just say at most. And we don't really know if we're going to have 100 years. There's no guarantee. Just like Maharaj Parikshit, I like to give you examples sometimes. He was cursed to die by an inexperienced Brahmana boy, Shringi, to die within 7 days by the bite of a snake bird. So one may think, well, my position's not very good, but at least it's not that bad. At least I'm not cursed to die in a week. But in another sense, it's worse. He had a guarantee. His guarantee was he would not die before that seventh day was up. How much guarantee do you and me have? How much guarantee do we have? Zero. We don't have any guarantee. You could die in a moment from now, or 100 years from now. You have no guarantee. At least he had the guarantee. So these kind of realities should sober us up and make us a little more serious about making spiritual advancement now, because there may not be a later. There's no guarantee like that. It's good for us to hear these things. Let's see. I scribbled a few things down. I usually don't make notes, but somehow or another I just wrote a few things down. So there's also the functions of the mind, like thinking, feeling, willing, but there's also accepting and rejecting. Just like in the material world, we're always accepting and rejecting, but generally on the basis of sense gratification, whether immediate or extended through family or other ways. So in Krishna consciousness, accepting and rejecting doesn't stop, but it's on the basis of Krishna consciousness. Rupa Goswami describes in the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada refers to him as saying that, or giving the direction that one should accept everything favorable for Krishna consciousness, and conversely reject everything unfavorable for Krishna consciousness. So rejecting and accepting is still there, but the basis has changed. Instead of for sense gratification, it's for Krishna consciousness. Or you could say for Krishna's sense gratification. Even materially speaking, we form relationships, we're looking for that perfect reciprocation. And what do we want to do in whatever particular humor the relationship is? We want to come to the point where we want to feel in the core of our heart, sincerely, that we want to give ourselves to the other party, wholly, fully, without any regret, any remorse, or any holding back even a little bit. We really want to come to that position, but we never quite get there, you know, on the bodily platform. This is natural. And although we should come to that point once again, awaken to that point, I should say once again, with Krishna. And when we fully awaken to that point once again with Krishna, Krishna gives himself to us. And so if you get Krishna, you automatically have everything. You're not at a loss for sense gratification. You're not at a loss for liberation or anything else. Even though separately speaking, you may not be interested in these things so much. You have it all because you have Krishna. There's nothing outside of Krishna. So we have to daily delve into Srila Prabhupada's books. Of course, there's our own individual study, but also Prabhupada prescribed these classes. We come together and hear and discuss these things like this. Just like in the Srimad Bhagavatam, you could say there's so many Bhagavatam classes going on in the Bhagavatam itself. Just like the main speaker is throughout the Bhagavatam, its entirety is Sukadeva Goswami answering the questions and speaking with Maharaj Parikshit. And there are so many others gathered also. So one of those personalities gathered there was Sutta Goswami. And after some time, he went to, many of you know this, he went to Naim Sharanya. And the sages there elected him to the Vyasa sign to hear from. One reason, because they knew he was there listening to Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami. So they were convinced of his being bona fide. And so they said, you please, you narrate what happened there to us, what was spoken, but not just like a parrot, not just like repeating like a parrot, but we insist you also give your own sweet realizations. Now, you can't insist upon someone giving their own sweet realizations unless you're convinced they're bona fide. You're not going to say like that. So sometimes the example is given that in nature, a particular kind of parrot, when he breaks the skin of a fruit with his beak, somehow or another, nature's way, Krishna's arrangement, that the unlimited nectarian sweetness in the fruit is enhanced even more so, somehow or other. So the Bhagavatam is fully sweet already, But when touched by the lips of a bona fide devotee, that unlimited sweetness is enhanced even more so. Materially speaking, doesn't seem logical. If something is completely enhanced, if it's complete, it's complete. There's no more room for increase. But the spiritual nature doesn't play by the same rules. It can be complete, but it can also increase. So we can't speculate about the spiritual nature. We have to receive knowledge coming down from that spiritual nature. Then we can know things as they are. So the devotee ideally should be enthralled with all this knowledge and understanding and descriptions of the Lord. Besides the philosophy, there's also vivid details of the person who holds the position of God. We use the term a little bit loosely sometimes, love of God, but we mean love for Krishna. God's a position, like monarch, king, president. But if you want to speak about intimacy or love, you can't have it for the position. You have to get to know the person behind the position, who holds that position. So other traditions don't have this information of that person. The Vedic literatures have the information. Yes, he's God, but he's Krishna. Krishna's a whole lot more. He's God with the energy on the tip of his little finger. But more than that, he's Krishna. So we don't fall in love with God, so to speak. We fall in love with Krishna. Just like the inhabitants of Vrindavan is described, they don't care if he's God or not. And sometimes, or most of the time I should say, their bhakti takes precedent over everything else. They're not even aware, because of their love for him, that he's God. Occasionally it manifests, but very quickly Yogamaya drops her curtain and their love or bhakti takes precedent over everything. It's a kind of ignorance, but in another sense it's the highest knowledge, because it brings you the closest to Krishna. I'm going to wrap it up pretty soon. Just like in the spiritual realm is described, is divided. There are different kinds of spiritual planets called Vaikuntha planets. And there is one highest above them all called Goloka Vrindavan, Krishna's personal abode. And so in the other Vaikuntha planets, there are pure devotees there, and there are forms of the Lord in his Vishnu Murti forms and other forms. But all the devotees there, their devotional service or relationship with the Lord is in the mood of awe and reverence. Or in other words, they're always conscious of his majesty aspect, that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead and we're not. They're always conscious of that. Whereas in Goloka, that's not there. But you could say it's a kind of ignorance, but it's the highest knowledge because it brings you closer to Krishna. For more intimate transactions to go on between the Lord and the devotee, there cannot be this official recognition of him being the Supreme Lord. Just like if Mother Jasoda or Nanda Maharaj were always fully conscious that he is God, would they dare to chastise him or threaten him? No way. They'd be completely frightened, completely scared to even think of such a thing. But they can do so because of their bhakti, because of their pure love. And Krishna employs his Yogamaya energy to facilitate this. So these are I won't go too deeply into this. These are the different transactions that go on in Goloka. And we are being trained up, so to speak, in a sense, to revive our particular relationship in Golok. That is the most fortunate thing. Of course, the Lord, when he appeared as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he taught that love for Krishna in separation is the highest of all. Well, why is that? Well, because in separation, everything becomes intensified, practically unlimitedly. You're always feeling anxious for the beloved, etc., etc. And in separation, you just yearn unlimitedly for them. So all these things are contained just in the writings of Srila Prabhupada alone, what to speak of all the previous acharyas, etc. So we should take advantage of this. Books are the basis. If you don't have a little bit of footing in the books, then you don't know what you're doing. I mean, you may stick around for a while, but better you get some ground yourself in Srila Prabhupada's books like this. This is the basis of everything. And one can feel very secure in this way. Prabhupada guides us, practically takes us by the hand. Just like in the beginning days of the movement, he gave us the Krishna book, which is a summary study of the 10th canto. But all intertwined within the narration is his Bhakti-Vedanta purported explanations and descriptions of everything. So we don't get any weird or wrong ideas about Krishna and his Leela. And at the same time, he also states that if you do this, you take advantage of the Krishna book. But if you're a serious student, you'll also simultaneously read the entirety of the Bhagavatam, starting from the first canto, taken in small installments and go through its entirety. And then you become sufficiently purified that by the time you get to the 10th canto, you delve into it properly, like that. Practically the first 9 cantos are to convince us in one sense that of the greatness of Krishna. Because if you're not convinced of his actual position, of his greatness, then where's the question of surrendering? Anyway, so many things. I should stop here. It's that around that time we're supposed to stop. But if anyone has any questions or comments or anything to add, we can entertain that at this time. Anyone has anything at all? Yes. Speak up a little bit, please. Is it working?
Can you give us some practical tips on how to disassociate from the false ego? I mean, every day we know practically, like theoretically, that we're not the body. Just from your experience, could you share using, I guess, intelligence to?
Well, the whole process of Sandha Bhakti helps us to do that. It's mentioned in one place in the Nectar of Devotion that the Pujari, he's acting in a position of spirit soul. You may think, well, how's that? He's just standing up on the altar, waving different articles in circles, so what? But he's acting in his position of worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a process of remembering and also being reintroduced to Krishna. We were in a forgetful state, but now we're in the state of awakening gradually. It's not going to happen in a day. But as long as we take the process sincerely, then gradually, we do become awakened, and our false ego becomes replaced with real ego, like that. So simply adhere to the details of the process, that's all. Don't expect it to happen in a day, though.
It's like reassurances or just some...
Krishna gives his reassurance in so many places. If you do like this, then you'll come to me. So Krishna gives us assurance, we should feel assured.
Would you consider it impersonal if like, you went from the mind to the intelligence, like, I'm not the mind, I'm not the thought, I'm not the body, I'm not whatever.
Well, the intelligence can discriminate. The mind just accepts and rejects. So the intelligence should override the mind, not the opposite way around. Mind just accepts and rejects, so there should be something higher that discriminates what's actually most beneficial. That's our intelligence. And the instructions of the spiritual master becomes our intelligence. Of course, ultimately, the Supreme Lord is Guru. He's the spiritual master. And someone who's properly lined up with him in parampara and can represent him purely, he's also a spiritual master. So we should probably wrap it up now, or, well, we don't have to, I guess. No one's coming in to give another class. If anyone has anything else. Otherwise, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.